Ahoy, everyone. My name is Bobby Shortle, and I'm here with Nick Rocco Scalia, and we are the Intrepid Filmographers. Every mini-series we chart a course through the full filmography of an under-discussed genre or journeyman filmmaker. In this expedition, we do our best to try and be explorers, using our years of film knowledge to help guide us, but always being open to discovering new things about the medium we love so much. We are currently deeply embedded in the films of Ben Affleck, and today we head to the past for his fourth film, Live by Night, and see just how big can Ben Affleck's hats get.
Hats and also jackets.
Hats and also jackets. Big hats, big jackets. You can tell this gentleman was in real big-time muscled-up shape for doing superhero movies when he's doing this movie, because he looks like a hulking beast. Those jackets.
He kind of does, but also still they're not tight. They're like still too big.
No,
so
that's what I
he's
mean,
big,
yeah.
and then the jackets are like extra big. So
Yeah.
and like, look, we've talked about this on the show before. I love like menswear in movies. Like I'm kind of a style guy. I enjoy that. You know, when I see a film that has interesting male wardrobe, I'm like, oh, cool. Like I like fancy ties and suits and things like that. But like, it looks terrible in this movie.
It really does. I mean, well, not to
This is not Guy Ritchie's The Gentleman at all.
No, not to gild the lily or to bury the lead or whatever euphemism you want to use for delaying delaying the reveal of something.
No, go ahead and do it right now if you want.
Yeah, this movie is poop.
This movie's not good. Yeah.
Poop by Night is what this movie should be called.
Boy, we're starting out on a real classy note tonight.
Real classy
I'm
note.
talking about fancy menswear, and you're talking about poop.
Yep. Well,
welcome to the Intrepid Filmographers.
Welcome. You know, I knew it was going to not be great, right? Because of everything we've heard about it.
Sure.
But I think you and I both go into these things very much hoping that we are either the outlier for those opinions, or even just feel like you guys are flat wrong. This is like a masterpiece. You know,
And I
that's
really wanted this one to be, for sure. And honestly, like, thinking back, this was the reason why we're doing Ben Affleck on the show anyway.
It's true.
I was reading the source novel, Live by Night. I'm a big Dennis Lehane fan. We talked about Gone Baby Gone. And I thought the book was great. And I was like, okay, I know Ben Affleck made a movie about this that everyone hates. How could he have fucked this up? And that was kind of the impetus for me coming to you and saying, hey, we should do Ben Affleck. And thus far, we've seen 3 movies that I think were even better this time than they were the first time or a couple of times that I saw them. So this was a pretty big disappointment for me. I will say, though, you know, right off the bat, I'm not going to try to get too much into the book, Live by Night. It's a very different thing in a lot of ways, but there is, like, you look at this movie and you think, yeah, there is a good version of this story somewhere, and that's where it is. So if you're at all interested, and it's really interesting stuff. It's prohibition. It's, you know, this... It's a gangster story with kind of an interesting through line about it that the movie doesn't really have at all. It's an interesting romance, and there is a good version of the story. It exists in Dennis Lehane's book, and maybe someday someone will take another shot at it. It would be great as a television series, a little, you know, 10-part, maybe Apple TV thing.
We keep bringing it up.
Like
it's
that.
definitely an Apple TV situation.
Yeah,
Dennis
got
Lehane is definitely got Apple TV vibes for sure.
But yeah, it's an unwieldy novel. There's a lot to it. It's many parts. This story is all over the place in the sense that it's, you know, it starts out in Boston and kind of expands to the larger world, which is kind of like a metaphor for Ben Affleck's career in some sense, but it does not do justice to Ben Affleck's career. I'll say that.
So he wins Best Picture as a producer for a 2010 movie in 2011, right? That's what it was.
You're talking about Argo?
Yeah, Argo, yeah.
2012.
2012, sorry.
The Town is 10, Argo is 12.
That's right, it's 12. He wins it in 13. At this point, he's already circling this book, right? In 2012, he basically says, basically gets attached to the book. Originally, the book is optioned by, what is it, Warner Brothers?
Yeah, Warner Brothers, and for Leonardo DiCaprio.
For Leonardo DiCaprio.
To produce and star in.
Makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, coming off The Departed, a couple years after about 5 years after The Departed.
Yes, but I'm just saying, DiCaprio, his form of stardom and his form of movie acting makes a lot more sense for a lot of what this movie is than Ben Affleck being
you
the
don't
star
like
of it.
Ben Affleck's monotone that he uses through this entire movie. I was seriously thinking of like just signing into this tonight and just doing that voice the entire time.
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
never modulating tone of my
Nope.
voice ever
Nope.
at all. Not even once. Not even when my loved ones are killed in front of me, but
Continues
with a Boston
my
accent.
criticism from Argo, right? My main criticism is his performance is he's putting away all of the Ben Affleck screen persona tricks in an effort to, I think, get out of that criticism and show that he can do something else. And in both of these instances, he kind of fails, right, at doing it.
This one
Um,
quite a bit more
I
significantly, I
agree
would
with you,
say.
but that's also because the movie is way worse around him,
Yeah,
right?
agreed.
I think that's
Again, I
also
think
the
Argo's
case.
great. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think like so he this becomes what happens to a lot of directors when they have a massive critical and commercial success like Argo was, right? A movie that basically puts you on the map as going, you, if you're not one of the guys right now, you are right on the precipice of being one of the guys.
Yeah.
If your next movie does the same thing or levels it up a little bit, from the movie you just did, you're going to be able to write your own ticket for the rest of your career, basically, for at least for a decade of your career, right?
Absolutely. And this is an ideal next project for Ben Affleck
Mhm.
after Argo. So, he starts out his directorial career. We've talked about, everything that happened before that, but he is the Boston Scorsese or something like
Mhm.
that, right? He makes those two Boston crime pictures, one of them based on a Dennis Lehane novel. So that's a great start there. He's coming off the Oscar win. So it's time to do something a little more expansive, a little more
Mhm.
epic, which Argo certainly is, right? I mean, that's when he sort of got out of the Boston crime movie thing. And so now he's going back to that, but like on a higher level in some sense. It's a period piece. It's a more sweeping sort of story than those two. Like this should have been his perfect project to do after that movie. I mean, literally, I couldn't think of a better thing, better step for him to take in his career after that. But some stuff got in the way of this maybe being everything that it could be.
Right. I mean, one of the big things, right, is he gets cast in Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. That holds up the production of this movie probably by about a year or two. Ends
That
up
and Gone Girl. So I mean, which is a great
right.
movie, and he's
One
very,
good,
very good
one
in it.
not one great decision, one not so great decision.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
sure the superhero stuff is more time consuming, and
Yeah.
because he is supposed to be kind of instrumental in that franchise, he's going to direct his own Batman movie and
Mhm.
star in it, which we never got. Which, after seeing this, I'm kind of glad. Considering the disaster in some sense that this was, who knows what that would. There's an alternate timeline where that movie comes out, and I'm
It's
interested
true.
in talking about it on this show.
I think if
Alternate
this
me.
movie wasn't as colossal a failure as it was, now seeing this movie and looking into it a little bit more and how big of a failure it was, even monetarily, I didn't realize how big of a failure it was monetarily, right? That because I didn't realize it cost $90 million to make or whatever,
Right? Yeah.
which is a nutso total for this movie to cost.
Well,
Because
it's a handsomely mounted production. I'll say that about it. It's a good-looking movie. It's got a lot of expensive stuff in it.
it's true. I would say
Those very big suits could not have been cheap.
some of it is very good looking. I think
Shot by the great Robert Richardson. Love
once
that
they go
guy.
down, like once they leave Boston, I would say, I think the movie really opens up a lot more and I think looks much nicer. The Boston stuff was just had all of that, like, it wasn't the cinematography, it was just like more of the color. It was just like, it's all sort of like gray with
Gray and
like
brown, very
gray
muted.
and
Yeah.
brown, and it's like when you try to do that, if you're not like a certain filmmakers or something like that, it all just ends up looking like dog water to me. You know what
Yeah,
I
I
mean?
agree. And it does. I mean, there's some beautiful scenery in this movie. It's shot in
Yeah.
Georgia, standing in for Florida because it's cheaper to shoot in Georgia. So they
Yeah.
saved a couple bucks that way.
Yeah.
I will say, I mean, I think what we're going to end up doing tonight is just like criticism after criticism. This
I
movie's
have
not
some
not
nice
good.
things to say.
I do too.
Yeah.
But I will say one thing that really works against this movie, and I ended up watching it 1.5 times, and it really stuck with me the second time. This movie has very little atmosphere, considering
Mhm.
it's a period piece, and it has very few wide shots that give you any sense of what this world is like at all.
Agreed.
And I think part of that is because they're just, they're hit for time. This could have been much, much longer. My favorite review of this movie, which I think nails everything I think about it, it's a guy named Matt Ryan, I think, from Up Rocks, which not a critic I'm familiar with the rest of his work, but I think he really hit the nail on the head here. And he says, the headline of the review is something like, Live by Night should have been 8 hours long. And I
Mhm.
agree 100% with that. And it's like, what are you losing? I mean, there's a lot of story in this movie. I mean,
Mhm.
it's not boring. It's dull. A lot of critics use the word dull. I agree with that. but it's not boring and it's not without incident, but it's completely without atmosphere. You know, we're in these like amazing looking clubs and you
Hmm.
know, these fancy hotels and this bootlegging operation, and you get like no sense of it whatsoever. You know,
Yeah.
like this is the antithesis of, you know, the 40-minute wedding scene that opens The Godfather, where it's just like you meet all the characters, there's this incredible atmosphere, the place, like I feel like I've been to that house, I feel like
Hmm.
I've lived there, I feel like I've attended that wedding. And there's like nothing in this movie where I feel like it's a real place. It's like we're there and then we're gone, we're somewhere else. You never really see the wider world beyond these characters. I just like, if every once in a while it would stop so I could see the storefronts on a street in Boston,
Hmm.
or just like get a sense of the, you know, this amazing, in the book it's the Ringling brothers, I think, that want to buy this hotel or build this hotel like down in the Florida Keys, which is a beautiful place to shoot. And it's, you know, recreated to some extent in this movie, but like you don't even get to spend like seconds there. There's like one scene that takes place there. Everything is just like one and done. Every scene is
Yeah.
just, you know, there's no time to build any sort of connection with the world or with the characters anywhere in this movie.
Yeah. I agree with you completely on that. And I'm sure as we go through, we'll highlight some of the specifics we're talking about. You know, for me overall, the movie, it commits the biggest sins you can possibly in movies for me, which is that the beginning is interminable.
Always sad, yeah.
The middle is kind of okay. And then the last third is also interminable. You know, other than one big scene that happens. Sandwiched in there are two, I think, spectacularly staged, let's call them action scenes. I don't know, they're gunfights, whatever, car chase, whatever you want to call it. I think these two big scenes are spectacularly staged and really make you, it really highlights even more how poorly, sorry, I wouldn't say poorly because that's harsh, how pedestrian the making of the rest of the movie feels in so many ways. We've talked about throughout the series, the beginning, I'm a fan of Ben Affleck.
Me
Even
too.
performance wise, I can be a fan of him. He is in a movie full of bad decisions. Him being the lead is probably the worst of them because he just can't do it. He cannot hold this thing together in the way he needs to. He doesn't project the kind of internal life with his face that he needs to for this character to work. A character who is often a passenger a lot of the time in what's happening, as much like in many epics, right? The main character is. They are often going from place to place and doing things, but there's also a lot of events out of their control that are happening around them. And it's about kind of their journey through this sort of world that they're in, right? And this,
Henry Hill in Goodfellas in some
yeah,
sense is that, right? I mean,
yeah,
he's an active protagonist in that film, but we are seeing that lifestyle through his eyes. He's not part of it, but he's out,
right,
which is similar in some sense to this character, the
yeah,
Irish guy who's, you know, taken on, but not fully taken on by the Italian mob. That's an interesting story. And yeah, I agree. His character is like, you know, you want to say he's a cipher, but it's not even that, right? To me, a
no,
cipher is someone who does have something going on and you just don't know what it is.
yeah,
He's just a nothing. He's a mannequin.
yeah,
You know, the every line delivery is exactly the same.
yeah,
And it's an emotional story, right? Like the idea behind Live by Night is about, you know, it's about morality. It's about these relationships that Joe Coughlin has, first with one woman in Boston and then with a Cuban woman who he marries down in Ybor City, Florida. And in the novel, not to go back to that too much, but like I said, it's just worth considering what this story could be. That's like the most important thing in the world. Zoe Saldana is barely in this film, and that character is so important to that story and
right.
so important to Joe's life. And like, you know, I will say this about Live by Night. This has one of the best trailers I've ever seen. Like after I read the book and I knew we were going to talk about the movie, I was like, let me just see what this thing looks like. Cause I really was thinking this was going to be a Southland Tales for me. This is going to be
Mhm.
one of those much hated movies that I'm going to see it and defend it to the death. I feel like Megalopolis is going to be that too, but I
Mhm.
still haven't seen it. The trailer is fantastic. It's full of action. It looks great. It's got all the kind of, you know, all of the atmosphere in the movie. What little there is in the trailer, you know, the dancing and the music and, you know, all of these cool things that you're like, oh, this is going to be an epic gangster story. And the movie doesn't have any of it. I mean, it's just it's so unaffecting in every way.
Yeah. And you know from all the quotes you see from Affleck about this book and this undertaking that was the last thing he wanted it to be, right? He obviously seems to have reverence for the book and
Sure.
love for the book. But, like I said, going back to his performance, it really is the thing that holds the movie back the most for me because, there are these three really two romantic relationship women in the movie, and then one woman who has a big part of the story played by Elle Fanning. Obviously, isn't a romantic interest, but they have a couple of scenes together, right? And I think Sienna Miller plays the first character, right? His kind of like the woman he's in a relationship with, who is also in a relationship with the head like Irish gangster in Boston, Albert White,
The one who
right?
really gets him into trouble. I mean, he's a criminal.
Yes,
He
yes.
there's an interesting thing this movie does. Like,
I
I
guess we
don't
should set up
remember.
what the movie is first, right, before
Sure.
we dive
Yeah,
into
yeah,
the
yeah.
thing.
Let's do that.
Which is that it's a story of was Joe Coughlin, that's his
Joe
name,
Coughlin. Yeah.
right? Who is a World War I veteran who kind of sees the grossness of humanity in World War I and comes home and is like, well, like I saw good people die. He doesn't, you don't get any medals for being like, you know, like the saint,
Morally righteous. Yeah. So
morally
I'm
righteous.
going to be, he's his thing, and it's expressed a couple times in the movie. He's not a gangster. He's an outlaw, right?
Right. He
Like
doesn't kill
he's not
people.
taking
Yeah.
orders from anyone.
Yeah.
He tries not to kill people, or,
Hmm.
I guess if they have it coming, I'll tell you, I disagree with you about the action scenes. We'll get to those, but there's a couple of moments where the character threatens people, little dialogue scenes
Hmm.
like that I really, really like. Taken,
Yeah.
a lot of it is taken. I mean, the plot is changed a lot from the book, but a lot of the dialogue and a lot of the incidents are pretty directly adapted. And there's one of them, and I'll credit Dennis Lehane for it. I just love it so, so, so much. I wish it was in a better movie, but boy, is it fantastic. Well, that far down the
So
road.
he comes home, he becomes this kind of small time crook. He gets involved with this woman
His
who,
father's high up in the Boston Police Department, which is
yes.
important. He's the youngest son of the commissioner, or he's going to be the superintendent, and he's going to be the
Yeah.
commissioner, something like that.
So I'm trying to give a high level plot description, and Nick's like, wait, we got to go through all the details of
The
what
ranking of
of
his
the
father.
ranking
Yeah,
of
we need
what
to
his
know the
father
exact
is.
rank. Well, because it's Brendan Gleeson, and he's the best
We
thing in the
will,
movie.
and we'll
so.
get to Brendan Gleeson in the
Okay.
scenes. So he gets involved with this woman who is the mistress of the head of the like Irish crime family in Boston, Albert White. He gets found out. Their relationship gets found out. He tries to get pressured by the Italian mob boss to work for him and take out Albert White. He refuses. He decides they're going to run away together. He tries to. There's a bank robbery that goes wrong. He ends up getting arrested. The woman ends up, we think, dying, and
Betraying him, but in a way
Yes,
where it's like
betraying
she thinks he's not going to die, but
yeah,
he's
I'm so
going to
sorry, Joe. And then
die. I can't wait to talk about Sienna Miller in this movie.
and then he gets a smaller sentence because his father is a very high-ranking member of the police. His father dies before he gets out of prison, and when he gets out of prison, he basically goes to the Italian mob boss and says, "Look, you still haven't gotten Albert White. I know I said I wouldn't do it before. I'll do it now. Let's go." And so this Italian mob boss sets him up with this rum operation in Florida that Albert White has been sort of messing with. And his goal is to go down there is to get it back up on its feet and also take care of Albert White. This is kind of the longest section of the movie, right? When they're in Florida, he kind of becomes like a very important figure down there.
It's about 1/3 in Boston and 2/3, something like that,
Yes,
split
yeah.
roughly into thirds.
But in the end is betrayed by this, Italian mob boss who teams up with Albert White. And then there's this big, huge shootout at the end. He gets away, he leaves the life, and he goes home to his wife, who then gets shot with 7 minutes left in the movie. And then the movie is over. But he gets shot by this police captain who he had a relationship with, whose daughter ended up trying to go to Hollywood to become an actress, ends up getting addicted to heroin. Affleck uses that to sort of put leverage onto the captain. And then she becomes like this religious zealot figure who gets his casino messed up, which is what sends the mob bosses down on top of him. And then that police captain who has lost his mind because his daughter took some nudie pictures, like ends up killing Joe's wife. And then that's basically
Your
the end of the
60-second
movie.
synopsis of this movie feels like 100 different movies, just all.
Because it is 100 different
It
movies.
is, yeah, just thrown in the blender, and I will say, as I said, the book does all of that and more than that. But
Well, yeah, sure.
it's an epic length novel that required an epic length movie. So some of the criticism I read of this said, it feels rushed. That was a word I saw a lot too. And I think that's definitely a big part of it. A lot of them
Yes.
wanted to blame it on his, on the DC universe
Hmm.
thing that he was getting involved in, and it's like he had to prioritize that. And Ben Affleck, reading some of his quotes, he was talking about how important it was to make this movie, and I am prioritizing this movie. I miss when you'd go to the theater, and this would be the big kind of movie. Very not so subtly dumping on the superhero genre that was
Hmm.
making a lot of money at the time. This was the kind of thing in the 70s or, in the 80s and 90s to a lesser extent.
Yeah.
These are movies that would attract people. The Godfather had people lined up around the block to see it. It was a
Right.
huge success of a movie and everybody was seeing it back in the day.
Mhm.
So he at least paid lip service to that idea. But I feel like, the lack of effort and the lack of care and the lack of, development of this, plus the fact that you've got this story that just stretches out in so many sort of not exactly fitting together, obviously, directions. I wasn't sure if you were going to mention this stuff with Loretta Figgis and that whole
Right.
business there, because you could kind of cut a lot of that out of the movie. I mean, that sets up the closing scene in
It
some
does.
sense, but it has very little to do with, really I guess, again, if you want to sort of look at the moral framework of this character and what drives him, it's not unrelated, but it feels awfully unrelated. And particularly because this movie's so disjointed, because it's, like there's less connective tissue in the movie than there was in you just describing the movie, I think
Yeah, I
is what I
know.
was kind of trying to say there. So
Yeah.
it's a tough watch. I mean, you know, I don't know that I could have followed this at all had I not read the book recently in the last couple of months. And even then, because there were some changes where I was like, wait, where is this thing? It was tough to follow for me.
So I guess I followed the plot of it pretty easily, but I can say I followed the events that were occurring pretty
Okay, it's
easily.
sure. But
But
just the through line of the character, right?
but
Like it
again, there is no that's missing, right?
yeah.
The movie tries really hard, and I'm sure this is what you're talking about with the actual story is when the book is about, is to give you this sort of through line with Joe that it's about much like, right, like the storyline of Michael Corleone and The Godfather, right? How do you be part of this life and not become a monster, right? And there's a lot of talk, especially with the Zoe Saldana character, who is like, I don't want to see you become a monster, right? That's a big part of it. And it's like, she's sort of sitting there, doing the thing where she's like, I don't want you to do this because if you do this, like, you're going to become that man I don't want you to become, whatever. And
Right.
it's,
Well, her thing is like, to do this, you have to be crueler than I think you are. And he says,
yeah,
I'm not, and I can do it anyway. And it
yeah.
turns out, of course, that you have to be. You
Right,
got to
that's the
play the
whole
game.
battle, right? Is like, can I do this and not be cruel? He makes a whole big point of being cruel. The problem, right, is that again, the performance doesn't give you that, right? In many places. And neither really do the way, and maybe it's because everything happens so fast, neither do the way the events lay out. Because in no moment am I like, when Joe kills somebody, when he kills like the Ku Klux Klan guy in the factory or whatever,
It's my
right?
favorite scene in the movie, though.
Good scene. But in
Yeah.
that scene, when he kills him, I'm not like, oh my God, he just shot the guy in the head without any provocation. Which I think you're supposed to have a little bit of that. Like, this is a side of Joe we haven't, this is like a merciless side of Joe
Yeah.
we've never
But
seen
it kind
before.
of comes out of nowhere. There's no
Yeah.
consequence to it. I mean, the book is episodic too, but the movie is episodic to a fault, right? Like
Yeah.
there's this set of people to deal with, then there's this set of people to deal with, then there's another set of people to deal with, and they never really come together. They never really interact. This is a criminal network. It's an organization,
Hmm.
and there's all these enemies on various sides of it, and we never get a sense of the big picture kind of at all. Like
Yeah.
it tries to bring, I mean, the book does a very good job of that. And the movie, like, kind of just half-heartedly explains in a couple of scenes, this person works for this person and you got to deal with this person, and this person you can't mess with, but this one, just knock them off and take over is like, there's a lot of that in the book, but it's all laid out so clearly. And here it's just like characters say names and you're like, who the hell is that person? A
Yeah.
lot of them you never even see. They're just kind of referred
Hmm.
to. You never even get a scene with them. There's a lot of one scene characters here. Fun cast, right? Like Anthony
Yeah.
Michael Hall shows up for like
Hmm.
30 seconds or so. Clark Gregg, who I love,
I
shows
know.
up
I was
for
like, hey, when I heard
the
his voice, did you hear his
little bit
voice before you
less.
see his face? I was
Yeah.
like, that's Clark Gregg. I know that voice anywhere, Yeah, for sure.
Chris Cooper is in this movie. He's in this movie more than he was in The Town, but
He
not
is.
by much.
Yeah.
He's a little more consequential in this movie. But
Yeah,
yeah, it's like just stuff happens. And this movie, like the body count in this movie is astronomical, right? Like
it's
it
true.
might set a record, aside from Scarface, maybe. I love gangster movies. I've seen all of them. And I feel like more people get killed in Live by Night than any of the others, but no death has any sort of impact whatsoever.
No, of course not. Well, yes, absolutely not. And I think I want to make something clear. We talked a lot about how the movie feels rushed, and we talked about reviews that are like, it should be longer. I want to be absolutely clear. This book deserved a more well thought out and longer adaptation. I do not want to see one more minute of this
Oh, no,
version
no,
of
agreed.
it. Yes, I
Agreed.
know. I just want to make sure people know that that's what we mean by this, because it is definitely one of those movies. I was like, I was like, how? What is there? Like 20 minutes left in this movie? And I checked, and it was like, no, there's an hour left in this movie. And I was like, oh, what a terrible feeling when you have
Sure.
that feeling.
And you're going to see people you've never even seen before. Like we're
Yeah,
we're in completely different places. This is a movie and its sequel. This is all three Godfather movies in one in some
yeah.
sense.
And then when Zoe Saldana got shot, I was like, had the opposite reaction. I was like, how much longer is left in this movie? I was like, there can't be more than 10 minutes left. And I looked, and yep, there was like 9 minutes and 58 seconds left or something of the movie. I was like, this feels like way too late for this to happen in the movie. There looks like there should be a lot more around this. So yeah, so it has a lot of pacing problems. Obviously, like we've talked about, things happen very quickly and then also very slowly at times. Like the movie, the movie goes through sort of the machinations of these families and the enterprises that he's going through very fast, very short change it, right? Where he's like, they called you the mayor of Tampa or whatever, or mayor of Ybor or whatever. And I'm like, when in this movie is it ever even shown that anybody likes him at all? Like there is not even a moment of that really,
No, 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 no.
But
Like he is never, it feels like he never really inhabits the world that he's supposed to inhabit. He's there, but it's like,
yeah,
any sort of power he has or any sort of, agency he has in that world, we never really see it at all. There's a
no,
moment, there's like a time cut. It's, I forget what the scene before this is, but then like we get a voiceover and he's like, we ran the whole rum operation in Ybor City. Like, when?
yeah.
It's like that would have been a whole half a sequence in itself in any other movie. And this one's like, nope, he's the boss now, took over everything. Bam, he's good.
Yeah. It's one of those voiceovers too where
Oh, it's brutal.
it's brutal. And also, you can in your mind see Ben Affleck in the booth.
Oh, yeah. I thought the same
You
thing.
know what I mean? It doesn't feel
Yes.
natural. There are
Yep.
plenty of times where there's voiceover where you're lost in it, right? You're like, this is this person's thoughts or whatever. But I could see like one of those shots of like a dark recording booth with a mic in front of his face and him just being like with his Boston accent,
And his hat. He had to
it-
wear the fedora.
wear
at that.
the fedora
Yeah.
for sure. Just
In
go,
the booth. Yeah.
and in this movie, I feel like it was like those like tricks that people play on other people where in a picture they'll like they'll like slowly make something bigger over time until the person notices. That's what I felt like was happening with these fucking hats. The hat he wears in that last big shootout scene when he goes to meet with the Italian mob boss or
It is
whatever.
massive. Yes.
It's so big. The hat is so huge. The suit is so huge. And I'm like, this feels like a joke to
You
me.
know what it kind of looks like throughout this whole movie? Like, in the cartoons when like two kids stand on each other's shoulders and put a
Yes.
trench coat over
Yeah. Yeah.
the hat and they look like an adult. It
Yeah.
kind of feels like he's doing that through the entire
It does
movie.
kind of feel like he's doing that. And the other thing about his stature, right, is that this also feels like a character, much like the character in Gone Baby Gone, right? The Casey Affleck character, where there has to be some form of you wouldn't see him coming, right? Like,
Yeah, right.
and that doesn't obviously the Ben Affleck, that's not one of his strengths. He's a tall, imposing, handsome guy who you would never be like can't blend into a crowd, right? And
Yeah.
that's why I said DiCaprio also makes more sense because he's got that scrappy,
Just
like
a little scrawny.
a little
Yeah, like kind
scrawnier
of
vibe
wiry
to him.
rather
Yeah.
than jacked like Ben Affleck is in this. Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree.
totally. And
That would be a lot more suitable, for the character as Dennis Lehane envisioned him for sure.
yeah, and this also, like you said, it feels like he even said it's like he's trying to do a 70s movie. He's definitely trying to do a Coppola, Scorsese thing right here. One of these epic sort of crime stories with all of these characters and different locations and a world that you get sucked into. And obviously he just, whether it's, development time or the studio being like, no, this movie has to be 2 hours or whatever. Because we said some of this right when we were talking about The Town, right? It feels like a movie that could be longer, but there's more to explore with some of these characters. But that movie obviously works, right? So is it a situation where they were getting on with it and there is like, a 4 hour cut? There's a brutalist length cut of this movie, or
And my
no?
fear about that version, as you were saying, right? Like there is a longer cut of this that exists and nobody wants to see it because nobody
Right.
cares, release the Affleck cut. But like, it's probably just more incident, right? It's just more
Yeah.
characters, more stuff, more scenes. So Scott Eastwood was cast in this movie, Clint Eastwood's son,
Mm.
and he plays Joe's older brother, Danny, who is the star of the previous book in this trilogy. This is the second one.
Oh,
And
okay.
so he's referenced. They talk about the character a couple times in the movie.
That makes so much sense.
He worked for the Boston Police Department and ends up in the police strike and then ends up out in Hollywood as a stuntman and becomes a screenwriter. So that happens in this movie. They go see a movie at the end, the
Mhm.
very end, in that 9 minutes and 58 seconds with no Zoe Saldana and no point for existing.
Yeah.
He takes his son, their son, to go see this movie. And he's like, "That's my brother."
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly like that, by the way.
It's exactly what happens.
No, I
It's
mean,
ex-
that's the line delivery too.
Yeah, that's what I'm
And,
saying here. It's exactly right. I feel like I was back in the scene.
Oh, perfect. I'm glad to bring you back to that riveting atmospheric scene.
Yeah.
Which, look, I love scenes taking place in movie theaters. That's my
Man, you
jam.
gotta watch Babylon. You gotta watch
Oh,
Babylon.
I do,
It
absolutely.
ends with me watching a movie scene, basically. Like,
Really?
uh-huh.
Like- Inglorious Bastards level?
No, very different. I can't even. I'm not
Okay.
going to spoil it for you because it
All
is
right, no,
like
please don't. You're right. Thank you.
It's one of
I
those
have some time
things-
off coming up. I'm watching that movie.
where you're like, what? In a good way. Not in like, if you like crazy weird swings with movies, which you do, that's how you'll feel about it.
I do. I feel like that's the one. That's my new Southland Tales. This
Yeah.
is not it.
Yeah. This thing is like, we mentioned this. We kind of talked about it a little bit last week, right? When we were kind of hoping that we would feel that other way about it. It's just not a movie that takes any swings at all. Really, it just
No,
feels.
and that's the other thing. Like, everything that we see is a cliche, right? It is.
Yes.
If you know gangster movies, then you kind of know all of these scenes. I will say the religious stuff is interesting. It's much more interesting in the book, but
Of course.
that's something we don't really see in those movies very much. This idea of this, born again character who is kind of thwarting the gangster operation, and because Joe Coughlin doesn't want to kill her, like, everybody else is like, just kill her and we could build a casino
Mhm.
and everybody's happy. And he's like, yeah, but I can't do it.
Yeah.
He has this moral code that we don't really understand, but
No.
she is a totally innocent woman who has been victimized and seems to have a real passion for what she's doing. He just refuses. He tries to talk sense into her, and she says, well, if God rewrites the Bible or something, so that, which I don't know that a real Christian would say that God wrote the Bible, but whatever.
Yeah.
That's the line in the movie. Basically, like, he won't kill her. He tries to talk sense into her, and she's just totally obstinate about it. I'm gonna prevent this. I'll do everything I can to stop you. And
Yeah.
even then, any other gangster's like, all right, cement shoes time, and
Yeah.
and he won't do that with her. That's interesting, but also she's in like 3 scenes.
She is.
There's the revival meeting scene is beautifully
She's
shot. but
quite
has
good in this movie too.
she's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the 3 female leads in this movie. Elle Fanning is fantastic.
Yeah.
Zoe Saldana, when we get to see her, is fantastic. Sienna Miller is hilariously bad.
It's so funny. Like, I felt very much the same way about Sienna Miller that you did. But then when I was looking up like reviews of the movie,
People really liked her performance.
people were
in
quite
this.
kind to her in it.
Yeah.
And like,
And I've seen her in other, like, I'm not shitting on her as an actress. I've liked
No.
her in other things. I think she's very good. She was great. She was in the last season of Curb Your Enthusiasm playing herself
oh really?
as Sienna Miller, who for some reason is very sexually attracted to Larry David,
Of course. Hilarious.
which makes no sense at all. And
Yeah,
she really pulled it off. So
Yeah.
she can act, but
Yeah.
the Irish accent and just the line deliveries and the pacing, and I mean, I feel like she was given this script and it's like, okay, go, like,
Yeah.
first take. Everything feels like first take.
Yeah. It's also, again, a character that is a cliche, right? That we've seen in a million gangster movies. in
She's a femme
million.
fatale.
She's
Yeah.
a femme fatale. She's going to betray him, or she's either going to betray him or she's going to die, or both. That you always know that's going to happen. And you mentioned right in previous episodes where you talked about the age the character is supposed to be, right? And he's supposed to be really very young in the beginning of the book, right?
Yeah.
It really sticks out here, not because they ever mention his age, 'cause they never mention their ages, right? Which is fine, but these two people who are in reality in their 30s.
Yeah.
Adults, full adult people, right? Act like idiots for that entire first 25 minutes of the movie or whatever it is. Like doing things that you're like, no thinking person would behave the way you're behaving when you're like sneaking around on a gangster. Now, if he was like 17 or whatever, or 20,
which is what he's supposed to be.
yeah,
Yeah.
then it makes more sense. Then you're like, oh, they're just dumb kids. They don't get the scope of the world, right? They don't understand, right, what their actions have consequences and all this other stuff, and they're just being selfish and stupid. But back there, they're like, it's the same thing with like Dear Evan Hansen, the movie version of Dear Evan Hansen, where Ben Platt, who is now 35 years old, played a teenager, and there are scenes where you're like, he's making these horrible decisions.
Yeah.
And they're horrible. Even look, the musical is very problematic in general, but at least when they're like 17, you're like, oh, it's a kid. He would make some decisions. This, where you're like, you look like a fucking teacher and you're making the worst decisions in the world possible right now. And it feels like that. It's just like they're just both annoying in this first section of the movie. And
they are. And then, I mean, it could be a really great scene where they sit down to dinner with Brendan Gleeson's character, and he does have the gravitas that something like this requires.
He's bringing the heat. He's bringing the heat.
Yeah, but he destroys the two of them.
Oh,
and,
yeah,
and
for
like,
sure.
He's not trying. He's a very charitable actor.
Yeah.
He's great as part of like put him with Colin Farrell. I'm sold.
Always.
Banshee's so fucking good.
Yeah.
But yeah, like that's an interesting scene in concept, in theory, but it's just like, it's these two idiots and Brendan Gleeson, who's a god, and it just doesn't work at all.
Yeah. Colin Farrell, better choice for this character.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I love Colin Farrell.
Like Colin Farrell, now that he's found his like groove, not like, because
still a little old, but
because
yeah,
Colin Farrell has done movies of this time period and they've been terrible, like Ask the Dust or whatever.
I've always wanted to see Ask the Dust. It's no
terrible,
good.
It's terrible. Film.
Robert Town's great.
It's a bad movie though. It's a bad movie.
Fair enough. Everybody else thinks so too.
It's like Robert Town in like 2005 though. Really, where I don't think he was throwing his fastball in 2005.
I'm gonna watch that after Babylon. I'll
okay.
I'll report
all right.
back.
Okay. Good. But I feel like so that hurts, right? Because of the age thing. It also hurts because, again, I really don't want to be mean about a performance because I think that, I don't want to be doing that. But
what
Affleck has, because it's like, how much can I harp on it? But he has zero chemistry with these two women that he ends up having significant relationships with. But those relationships seem like the thing he wants to spend the most languid amount of time shooting, right? Like the sex scenes or like the kind of romantic scenes are like take up as much time as like 4 plot scenes that happen in.
See, I mean, you're right, but like I felt like there should have been so much more of that. Like
there should have been more of all of it. This is what I mean. But I'm just saying, like, even doing that, I don't buy either one of relationships. There is one with opposite right of Sienna Miller. There's the scene where like Saldana and him first kind of like spark a little bit, quote unquote spark, their characters spark. Zoe Saldana is such a charismatic performer.
Yeah.
That you almost buy it, right? You're almost like the way she's reacting, the way she's doing things. If you were just looking at like her coverage, you would be like,
right. Yeah. But because it's him, I don't even believe her because like,
exactly.
You could have a brick wall there and she is very, very good in this, but like, there's zero charisma coming out of him. And it's supposed to be, they're in a club, this sort of like, it's really cool. Like this Latin bar, like in a swamp, this like speak is easy and, everybody's dancing. Like there could be so much atmosphere in this movie, the music and like the well-dressed dudes on stage playing the trumpet and everything. Like I want to see so much more of that. And we get so little of it. And then that scene, and she's dressed beautifully and like the music's great, but like the scene is just kind of flat, there's very like that should be so sexy. And like, she's doing everything she can to kind of sell it, and he's doing nothing. He's like anti-sexy.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. I think the person he's best with in scenes is Elle Fanning, as far as like the female characters in the movie, because there isn't supposed to be any of that.
They're not supposed to have a thing for each other.
Yeah. And they actually have there is some conflict in the scenes that he's able to portray better, because you're right. The best scenes he has in the movie are the scenes where he's kind of like shaking down
Yes, agreed.
individual people. There are a lot of, the funny thing about this movie being epic too is there are so many just fucking scenes where it's like, hey, I'm coming to talk to you behind your desk. I'm going to say some mean things to you. Like every other scene is that basically.
Yeah.
But
Which is also in the book.
oh, I'm sure, and I don't think there's
But
anything
there's a
wrong
lot
with those
more
scenes
in between them. No, but
There's
it is
more in
true, right? Like,
between.
we're going to go visit this person. We're going to have a sit down. We're going to have a
Yeah.
meeting with this guy. I mean, a
Yeah.
lot of the book is we're going to have a meeting with this guy.
Yeah, a lot of
And
scenes.
make him leave town. You know, you're going to be on the next train out of here. No, I'm not. Oh, yeah, you fucking are.
Yeah, a lot of scenes are Ben Affleck walking into a room
In a
where
very
either
suit.
he's going to get dressed down or he's going to dress somebody down. But he
Yes.
always walking into a room and there's always like one guy who the main guy is and then some periphery guy who's just kind of sitting there doing a weird job while he like the conversations are going on. The part of the movie I think has some juice, right, is this bank robbery that goes wrong, basically. He basically, Sienna Miller, we're going to leave together. I'm going to do this one last job and then we're going to go. Does this bank robbery that goes wrong? I really liked this car chase a lot. I thought it worked really well.
It just doesn't. There's
From
like
a form factor. I'm talking about just like from
I know, but I disagree even with that. Like it doesn't feel like the car chase in the town, I think, is fantastic through the north end, through the narrow streets there. Like this one, you know, it feels like a cutscene in a video game to me. Like it's very.
I mean, it's a little mafia coded. Like
yeah. Well, I've been playing through Mafia 2 for the last couple of months. I actually think the cutscenes in that movie are in that game are better than a lot of what we see in this movie. Better acted, better directed, but it's another story for another day. Pretty fun game from 20 years ago.
A long
or whatever.
time ago, yeah.
But yeah, like this has no weight to it. You know, that there's so much gunfire in this movie, and I don't think any one of them ever cracks that decibel level where you can kind of feel the impact of it at all. There's like, I love, it's got Tommy guns, Thompson submachine guns, what a cool gangster movie thing. Just like shooting cars full of holes. But like a film that I've seen dozens of times because I teach it in my class is Bonnie and Clyde. And that movie has car chases where you can really feel the impact of every bullet, particularly at the end, which is not a car chase. And this scene just feels like, it's like model cars. They shot it in real places because you never see it go above like, the first story level. So they're staying on the ground, which I think is a problem. In the town, you get some nice drone shots.
I feel like that's a period piece problem because I don't think Affleck wants to CG enhance, aerial shots to make it look like it's old-timey world.
They do it with the prison, which the prison is a huge section in the book, and he's there for like 30 seconds in the movie. But this is right after Boardwalk Empire on HBO, which cost a lot less than this movie and did a really good job of that. I remember watching some behind-the-scenes visual effects stuff of that, and they like recreated that. Like that show had insane atmosphere, and like this could have done that. When I remember seeing the trailer for this when it first came out, I was like they're probably doing the Boardwalk Empire thing here, and I'd be really into that. I don't know. This chase has like no weight to it. And like what happens there kind of pushes the story forward. But I don't know. I saw that twice. I watched the first half of this movie twice and I thought it might get better because it was after we had talked.
What a bad half of the movie to watch.
Yeah, I know. Definitely not a good half. Well, the second half would have had the same problems just on the other end. So,
it's true. Yeah, it's true.
Either way, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't.
Yeah.
But,
I enjoyed the car chase. I did feel like it had some weight. I liked some of the choreography of it. I liked that it was kind of shot like a modern car chase, other than having the aerial shots, obviously, which obviously would have helped a lot.
Yeah.
But with these old-timey cars, which obviously they were really driving old-timey cars, which I thought was cool. Like I liked that part of it.
The closing shot in that scene is really nice too. With the car on fire in the pond.
Like going to the pond. So I liked that. And then I kind of liked, again, the prison scene, obviously it feels like it's weightless, right? Because it basically comes and goes in like 2 seconds.
It's in the trailer.
But we get the great scene between Brendan Gleeson and Clark Gregg. I think that scene's awesome. Yeah. And then right from there, we kind of get we get him going to the mob boss and we get him going down to Florida where he meets Chris Messina off that train, right?
Can I, like, really quickly, because we might not get to mention him again.
Yeah.
Chris Messina is having such a good time in this movie.
Yeah, baby.
He's not good in this movie, but you can tell he's having a lot of fun, and that at least is infectious. Like, he brings some life to this where it desperately needs it, but it's a very, it's incongruous with the tone of the movie. He thinks he's in some kind of comedy. Yeah. And he's not. Dion Bartolo. I love it. Great name, too.
But because of how drab this movie is without having any gravitas, I would take a million Chris Messina type
Sure. And since
performances.
in most scenes he's there with Ben Affleck,
Yeah.
who's doing the opposite of that.
Yeah.
They're enjoyable together. I like those scenes a lot.
The only time Affleck has any spark is when he's in those scenes with Messina, because those are the only times where he lets sort of the like, I'm very serious and monotone and drab mask fall down a little bit. Because that scene, a little bit, because that scene where they go talk to the first guy, Anthony Michael Hall. Anthony Michael Hall. I was gonna say Michael C. Hall. Anthony Michael Hall is the one time where he has like a lot of little energy in the scene where he's kind of like, hey, John, what did we hear about this happening? Well, and like the mark in the bottles thing or whatever. Like he's getting a little bit of that like Goodwill Hunting, attitude seeping a little bit. I mean, it's very, very depressed down, obviously.
Kinda, yeah.
But he's got a little bit of juice in that scene, at least. Like, because I think Messina is playing it so heightened that he can't help but like drag himself up a little bit,
I will say about Chris Messina, though, I assume he is Italian American. There's a lot of broadly stereotypical Italian Americans, a lot of slurs. I hear Dago and Wop a little more than I'm comfortable with in this movie.
Some good old fashioned racism in this movie.
Some good old fashioned racism, which it's not racism. It's fine. There's way worse words than those. But after all, like, this movie doesn't earn it, right? I've heard of those movies, and I'm very proud of my culture. I'm very sensitive to those things, but not in the sense that, like, I know people that couldn't enjoy The Sopranos because of that kind of stuff. And I disagree with that completely. But this doesn't get that pass for me. If it was better, it would.
No. I think I'll say, as far as the accents and performances go, there's a lot of choices being made.
There are some choices. Look, Ben Affleck has a Boston accent, doesn't he? So why does it sound so phony in this movie?
Because he's
like,
doing...
just talk like you're you.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, this is one of those movies, too, where it's like, we got to travel with you through the whole movie. You're in, like, except for really Clark Gregg, Brendan Gleeson scene, you're in, like,
it's one of the best scenes in the movie.
Exactly. Yeah. I wonder why that is. You're in every single scene of this movie. You got to give me something. You got to give me something. Because I can't just stare at a blank wall for 2 hours and expect me to care about this guy, because you also don't give me enough time with any of the other people for me to care about them, right? So I have no in here. I kind of like Chris Messina just because he is just giving me a lot to look at,
and it's a nothing character. I mean, he adds basically nothing. It's just he contributes to the movie by giving an over-the-top performance that at least gives it a little bit of life in a lot of scenes there.
Yeah.
And again, it's the scenery is great, and the cinematography is very, very pretty. I mean, it's certainly not the best work that Robert Richardson's ever done,
of course
but because it's not an atmospheric movie, and he tries. It's shot on. He used some vintage lenses. Some of it does look very digital, very
that was my main thing. Yeah, it did. I mean, I think
but like that scene in the club I was mentioning, where Zoe Saldana's kind of looking out onto the water, not just because she's bending over right in front of the camera, a little gratuitous there, Ben Affleck, but it's a nice looking scene when they're the boat. Let me just get this out of the way. One of the other things I love in movies, the thing that if I suddenly become a billionaire from something, podcasting,
of course,
what I want, my first number one purchase, a wooden Chris Craft boat from about this era. There's one in this movie. It's in one scene. It's absolutely beautiful. It's the most gorgeous thing I've ever seen in my life. It's there and it's gone, but good on them for spending part of their $90 million on that. I hope somebody cool got to keep that. I hope they gave that to Brendan Gleeson.
I mean, Robert Richardson, like you said, I mean, obviously, famously, Quentin Tarantino's guy, right?
Yeah.
Shoots Quentin Tarantino's movies.
Scorsese shot The Aviator.
Yeah, shot The Aviator. Again, Aviator, a very good
Hugo.
Kind of comp, right, almost to this movie in some ways, which is just because period set, lots of different locations, lots of different big setups. Of course, you have a master director, setting it up, so you have a different situation there.
Very interesting performance at the center of it.
Exactly, yeah, which those things are missing from this, right? And also, the thing I was thinking about sometimes with this too was a very recent Scorsese movie, which is not shot, obviously, by Richardson, shot by Rodrigo Prieto, who we talked about recently as well.
Yeah.
Killers of the Flower Moon, which deals with some of the same things this is dealing with, the cost of violence, what it does to your soul. Can you be above the violence that is being committed? This whole kind of situation. Also this idea of like just some of the greatest, that movie, the greatest like montage of murders, right? Like this movie does the thing multiple times where it's like, it was the deadliest time in Boston history or whatever, and it shows those murders and it's like, okay, this is fine. Like there's nothing wrong with the way this is being shot
Completely
and edited,
inconsequential, though. Yeah, it's there's nothing to it.
but there's just not a style, like you mentioned, and a verve to it. There isn't anything propulsive to it. It really feels like maybe a little bit too, he's a little bit too self-serious about everything that's happening because he loves the book and he wants to do it by justice, but by doing that, he saps all of the energy out of it because he wants to be like this serious center. This is deadly serious stuff,
Yeah.
where when you have filmmakers, the great crime filmmakers, right, know that there is something inherently satirical and silly, even though it's really devastating.
Fun, right? Like
Yeah, fun,
one of the
yeah.
movies that I thought of a lot in this, because there's a couple of scenes that I think directly rip it off, is Brian De Palma's The Untouchables, which when I was in like fourth grade, I was like, this is the greatest movie ever
Right.
made, and I will never see anything better. And I love that movie very much. So you've got someone leaves a bomb in a place and it explodes, much better done in that movie. There's the Union Station shootout there's a shootout at the end of this movie where it's like, I have no idea what's going on. I don't care what's going on. I don't know who these characters are. Ben Affleck's like jumping behind couches with a gun.
That part is bad.
It's like trying to do John Woo Face Off or something at the end of this like very, like you said, self-serious movie. And you think about how much better those scenes are done in something like The Untouchables, where, every shootout is consequential. Every moment of that shootout, there's slow motion in that train station scene. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
The camera work is brilliant and the choreography is brilliant. This is just like a bunch of dudes who look like they're playing dress up, playing cops and robbers and, a fancy hotel at the end of this movie. Like, man, I wanted to like this so much. And I liked it so little.
So, but I was going to
Makes me
say,
want to
like,
watch The Untouchables again, though.
from the car chase till the point where he sort of tries to woo Zoe Saldana, like that like 20-30 minute chunk where they kind of, put the screws to Anthony Michael Hall, right? And where they go see Chris Cooper for the first time. That part, I was like, okay, like I got a little bit of propulsion going on. And especially because like
Chris Cooper's very good, as
so good.
always. But yeah.
Like, so good in this. But it's also because this is like 3, 4, 5 scenes that all take place within like the same day or couple of days. We're not speed running through
Agreed,
setting it up. We're really setting up who are the people who live here, who are, what's the state of play going on. Let's set up the players. Even when they go see, Saldana and her brother, also a good scene, right? They're like, I like that, like, I like the interplay there.
That's good rum.
Yeah.
Wish we could sell this up north. Sorry, I'll stop doing it.
But that stuff, I wasn't like, oh my God, movie has saved itself. But I was at least like,
it feels like a movie. It feels like what this movie
exactly.
maybe should be or could have been. I will say that even those scenes, right? They're in a distillery, like this kind of backroom distillery.
Yeah.
It's like the Breaking Bad meth operation of bootlegging. And they're talking about the whatever, the stills. I don't know much about the bootlegging business, but even that scene, there's no wide shot, right? Like it's Ben Affleck and Chris Messina standing in front of this giant metal tank. And it's like, let's fucking see that place,
Yeah.
Like this is like, you can build that. You're spending $90 million on this movie. They probably built a beautiful set there and we never even get to see it.
Yeah. And then once we get to Saldana and his like little flirty scene, and then this like the voiceover you mentioned, which is like, we took over the rum trade or whatever. From then
I was thinking like, I want to see that movie. Where's that movie?
From then on, the movie goes in the tank again for me, because then we get this new storyline, which is about, the character's name?
R.D. Pruitt. Yeah. Boy, Matthew Maher.
So
an actor we've seen before.
Yeah.
In Gone Baby Gone. And I like, Ben Affleck, we've talked about this before. He tends to work with the same people, crew-wise, cast-wise. I thought I saw Titus Welliver was supposed to be in this movie too, and they just did.
He's in the cast list.
He's in the cast, right? So Tim Hickey, who was Joe's boss before all the shit goes down in Boston. We never see him. He's never referenced, whatever. I would have loved to have seen some Titus Welliver in this movie. But Ben Affleck works with the same people a lot, which is great. I love when directors do that. So this guy, Matthew Maher, plays the most despicable child predator ever in Gone Baby Gone. And I love the idea that Ben Affleck calls him up and says, hey, Matthew, I got another movie I'm working on here. You have a great character. Oh, of course he does. I guarantee that he does. And Matthew Marr is like, oh, great. Do I get to play like a police officer or like a
Mhm.
rich guy or something this time? Like, no, you're going to be in the KKK. So you go
Yeah.
from child molester to KKK guy.
Yeah. So
Or Matthew Marr.
this KKK storyline happens, right? Which again is it happens in like it all happens in like 20 minutes,
It's an
basically.
episode. It's about 10 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, whatever it is. The voice that this guy is doing, I was like, what this is a definite choice you're making, my friend, because you sound like a fucking cartoon character. And I know he's supposed to be intimidating, and partly it's supposed he's supposed to seem like a weird yokel, and then he ends up being really scary or whatever. But I just had this like whole vibe of it being like, why is it such a big deal for you to like have to go through Chris Cooper to have to find this guy? I know he's like Chris Cooper's brother-in-law or something or
Yeah.
whatever he is, but it's like he like Affleck and Messina, who have like this whole operation, right? They have this whole crew, this whole look, we see at the end, they have like an army basically
Right.
that comes into this building and shoots all these people. I'm like, you can't find this one guy in Tampa? Like it just didn't play for me. And this whole idea that we're supposed to be so scared and intimidated by him, you know, and they have those scenes where he comes in and he shoots people in his clubs, and he like throws a bomb in one of his clubs, and also he uses the N-word liberally.
Yeah, well, I
You know,
mean, there's a lot of this racial stuff, but again,
yeah,
that's another thing that the movie doesn't earn at all. Like,
yeah,
I think the story, you know, as Dennis Lehane intends it, is that like the KKK is so powerful. The one scene, the one that I really like, where they go see the other guy, and
yeah,
you know, there's more important people than you. Then why am I talking to you? And they shoot him. It's great.
great.
But that guy kind of explains, you know, how powerful the KKK is,
Yeah.
but we never really see that. You know, they ride up, and it's obviously an iconic image. The guys in their hoods and the burning
Yeah.
cross, which you know is pretty obvious.
Yeah.
You know, it's a little bit of an over the top moment in this, like you said, very self serious movie.
Mhm.
But we never get a sense that they are kind of actually running things, which I think is what the book is
Yeah,
trying to
yeah,
say
that's
about
what I
that.
mean. And this movie
So
doesn't
it's like
sell
this
that.
not at all. So this
Yeah.
whole episode is just like Ben Affleck versus this idiot in a sweater vest, and
Exactly.
it doesn't play at all.
Yeah. Who's like, yeah, you get out of here. I don't want you here.
I'm
You
just
know?
playing with you.
Yeah.
I think he does that at one
He
point. Yeah.
does do that. And then he goes like, I'm gonna beat your skull in.
Yeah.
And then he's like, what'd you say? He's like, nothing. You know, whatever. So weird. Right. So this happens in a very compressed amount of time. They have another like, oh, and then we killed all of them scene where they kind of do something kind of smart, which is they kind of set up a way to, you know, when Affleck's in the characters in the hospital, you know, so I guess first happens, they puts the screws to Chris Cooper. Chris Cooper's whole thing is like, don't try to corrupt me, like, and we'll be fine or whatever. And then he sends his daughter away, Elle Fanning. She's going to go to Hollywood. Joe comes to talk to him. And again, Cooper's carrying these whole scenes, right? He's doing all the work in all these scenes. But the whole concept of the scene is that basically Joe has this dirt on his daughter and he doesn't want to use it. So he really tries to get him to give him this guy, BD or whatever, so that he can get rid of him without having to
And we
press him.
know he doesn't want to do that to him because he says, I don't want to do it.
I don't want to do this.
It's very, very obviously
Yeah,
spoken
you're
in
making
the
me
movie.
do this.
It's on the nose. Yeah.
I'm not making you do anything. Yes, you are. You know, whatever. So I like the concept of the scene, right? The
I do
execution,
too.
not great, but
It's really good in the book.
I bet it is. So, and then he reveals that, right, that there's like kind of naked pictures of the Elle Fanning
Well,
character.
they've made her, they've gotten her addicted to heroin.
They got
and
addicted to
the
heroin.
implications she's been prostituted out. And, yeah.
Basically, and then Affleck's like, we have her. Not like we're gonna kill her. We have her.
We sent her to a special doctor.
We put
which
her in
is
rehab.
creepy sounding in and of
Yeah.
itself.
But he says that, you know, we put her in rehab. Basically, is what he did. You know, and once you give us, you know, BD, we'll tell you where she is, and you can have her back. Like, you know, whatever. And then they set the sting at, like, not sting, but this basically trap at the casino.
Which is not really a very good trap
I guess
at
we
all.
haven't
He just-
even brought up this part of the story, which is that basically the rum trade is we mentioned, but the rum trade is doing great. But Affleck's character Joe is forward thinking. He's like, look, the prohibition's going to get repealed, and then this whole business is going to be gone. So we need something else, you know, and they want to set up a casino. So they buy this big building or whatever. They get the mob boss up in Boston really invested in it, right? And then part of the reason they really, really need to stop this guy is that he's really causing problems with their clubs, and it's kind of getting in the way of the casino business a little bit, right? So, but they set the meeting at this, you know, this not yet built casino. And what you were saying before, which is so true, which is like, I don't know how big the set actually was, right? I don't know if it's like you know, part of a set. And then they added on in digitally the casino building, but it's a pretty massive structure. Even the part that they just like walk on at the in this one scene, right?
Yeah.
And then they're only there like once for the entire movie. But they said this thing with him and ends up like Chris Messina and a couple other guys are like hiding out and they come out and they like shoot them all. And then Chris Messina accidentally shoots Joe right in the stomach or whatever. Which I
Yeah,
think is a pretty entertaining moment where he's
it
like,
is, but
"You
it comes
shot me."
to nothing
I
at
know.
all. It's like the two of them are like improving for like 5 minutes
That's
in that
exactly
scene.
what it feels like, right?
And then it's just over. He shot me. I didn't shoot you. That was the other guy. He came
Yeah,
out from over here. It's like
yeah,
very obviously like an improv exercise.
yeah.
And if it was consequential in the story, fine, but it's not. He's basically good to go like one scene later. So
But they use that as a trap to get the clan members to show themselves. So they try to come to the hospital to kill him. And then his crew member follow them home and kill them all. So they kind of wipe them out. They wipe the Ku Klux Klan member out. Again, it's one of these things where it takes all 15 minutes for this major storyline to be brought up and then got rid
then
of.
it's completely resolved. Like, yep, we never see
Yeah.
the KKK again. We've eliminated.
Yeah.
These guys have taken care of the racial problems in America in 5 minutes of screen
Yeah.
time. Great job.
This leads to the Elle Fanning character returning, which we mentioned before, and she becomes sort of like this born again. She only wears all white. Again, this is all described in a voiceover, like a very quick voiceover.
Yeah, and then we get that episode, which is about another 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah, which
it's
might
better than the
be-
KKK episode, but not that much better.
But it might be the best only because I think her performance is so interesting.
Yeah, she is
in it.
interesting. Her look is interesting. I
Yeah.
like, everything about that character is at least something.
Again, it should be a half an hour to 40 minutes long.
Yeah.
Because the time from I am sure of myself, religious zealot who got the casino shut down to I'm having a very like candid conversation with you in a cafe and then killing myself happen so fast. It happens all so fast. But that scene in the cafe,
But these are interesting because they're quiet scenes, right?
Yeah.
Like everything else is just like, even though the gunfire is not loud enough, so nothing
Yeah.
leaves any sort of impact. At least these scenes are, it's two characters just kind of interacting in a way that is interesting, even though, again, she's doing the same thing to Ben Affleck that Brendan Gleeson does earlier in the movie, where it's just that, he's hopeless. He's floundering and she's giving it 110% and he's giving it like 20.
Yeah. And that's in the diner where she says the thing about, I love that line that I'm sure it's in the book where she says, I don't know if there's a God, but if there is, I hope he's kind. Wouldn't that be swell or whatever? I really like that line. And that's when I was like, man, she's really good in this. Like I wasn't, it like snuck up on me a little bit because I was so done with the movie. I was just like, I just want this movie to be over. So I wasn't really looking for anything to enjoy left. I was just sort of like,
I kind of got the same way. I did. It is a more interesting watch if you've read the book, just because the things that are taken out and how are we going to get, because there are things that are like almost verbatim and it's like, okay, well that wasn't set up. So how are we going to get there? And usually it's just like, well, we're just going to do it anyway. I think that's kind of the feeling that I get through this. But yeah, as you were saying, every good line in this movie is right there in the book, and set up a lot better.
Yeah, which happens. I mean, adaptation is adaptation. It's fine, but this happened, and then she kills herself, and then we're into the last sort of chunk of the movie, which we already kind of talked about,
which comes out of nowhere.
Yeah,
so the boss wants to meet with them. We've met the boss's son, Max Casella's character, Digger, and he's a piece of shit. We know that right away, and we know there's going to be a clash between them. Joe Coughlin is kind of the surrogate son of the boss, and his real
Digger
son
does the
is
classic Italian American mobster thing in movies, which is when he first meets him. He's like, you think you can fucking talk to me like that? I'm just fucking with you. I like this guy. I like this guy. We get that whole thing going on.
We're not really like that. I don't know if you know this, but
I'm also Italian American, my friend. You don't have to worry about it. All right. I get it.
I've literally never had a conversation like that with anyone. But it's Max Casella. I like him. He was in The Sopranos too.
Mm-hmm.
He plays kind of one character, and he's just doing like a bigger version of that in this movie. And he's fun. Him and Chris Messina are kind of doing the same thing, but that character is not very threatening at all. But the boss calls him and then threatens him and says, "Oh, my son's taking over, and you're going to have to take a haircut." As they always say in these movies, like you're going to be demoted in the organization. You could clean the shit out of my toilet, or you could be a crew boss. And then Ben Affleck's like, nah, and his guys just come and shoot everybody, and then the movie's basically over.
Yeah. There are aspects of the shootout scene that I do like. I like the concept of it, right? And I think I liked that moment where he was
what concept?
So I like this I like more of like the setup of like the tunnel stuff and them coming from below to like take
But
them
we
out.
never even see that. That's the thing. So like he says it, this movie, right? He says to Maso, they're upstairs in this hotel, they're in the penthouse suite or something.
Yeah.
Well, my guys are in the tunnels and you're watching the front door and we're coming up from below. We see two guys climbing up a staircase that we assume it's not really shown, but we assume they're coming up from the basement. And then there's just the shootout and the
We
upper
do
floor is
see
the
a little bit
hotel.
of them in the tunnels walking through, for sure. We do. We absolutely do.
I guess.
Um, and I do think some of the staging, not all of it, some of the staging is very bad. But some of the staging in this shootout I like. I hate the Affleck jumping to the couch thing with his hair all floppy. I think it's so stupid. And
We
it
see
and
that
it
wearing the hat.
feels like he thought like this is like a money shot because they cut
Yeah,
back
it's
to
gonna
it
be
like
so
twice.
bad at.
Um, but there's some of the staging I like, some of like the filmmaking sort of structure that I like about it. I hate like I think it's hilarious that they come up from below, right? But then they come out the front door and shoot up at the balcony, people on the
Yeah.
balconies. I'm like, this is not the tactical way to do this. You like you guys have them on the price. Go up the stairs, go behind them and shoot them. Don't give away your advantage
Well,
by seeing them
they
on the
haven't seen
second floor.
episode 3, so they don't know about the high
No,
ground.
they go to high
But
ground.
yeah, like this scene is like all of the shooting that gets like so many people die in the scene, but there's no tension whatsoever. Like this scene opens with the elevator scene, right? Like he walks into this hotel, he knows the boss has an issue with him, and he's going upstairs to meet the boss. And these two lackeys come and meet him, and they're having this
Mm,
conversation about having kids, which is word for word from the book.
right.
And that should be really tense, right? He's getting on this elevator with these people that he knows, have ill
Mhm.
intentions for him. In a Brian De Palma movie, this is like unbearable. Like there's a totally nail biting sequence. It's drawn out a little bit. We're riding that elevator all the way up. And in this movie, he just kind of gets on and then the doors open on the upper floor and he talks to the boss and then shooting happens and that's about it.
Well, because I think in the structure of this scene, what they're trying to do is, or what he's trying to, not they, because he's everything in this movie. What he's trying
Everything
to
and nothing.
do
Sure.
is to kind of play with your expectations a little bit. And I'm not saying it works, right? But I think the intention is you get the scene before where Messina is sort of like, I don't like the signs. I don't, whatever he says, you're going to this place, we have no eyes, well, whatever. Well, I don't know what we're going to do. So you're going in and you have the opposite with the Joe character being like, it doesn't compute for them to kill us. It doesn't work. The numbers don't work out for them to kill us or whatever. So I think you're supposed to, in a good version of this, go into it being like, well, I believe who do I believe? Do I believe Messina's character who has a bad feeling, or Affleck's character who is like, no, it's gonna be fine. Like this is just whatever this meeting's gonna be, it's gonna be fine. And then so you get that scene with the talking about the kids where you're like, okay, it's not meant to be tense. It's meant to be like, oh, okay, no, 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 no. He was right. Like this is just like a friendly meeting.
But then you get like a tracking shot going to the elevator and there's a guy on there that's kind of shifty eyed
Right.
looking. And it's
But
like,
then I think it's supposed to set
give
it's supposed
me
to
a little more of that, I guess is
I
all I'm
agree.
saying.
Okay, but it's supposed to play back again to be like, okay, wait a second. This guy seems a little suspicious and he seems a little uncomfortable. So maybe this is supposed to be tense. And then he goes up there. And although it's like, oh, I'm not happy with what you did. Like it seems like he's not going to kill you, right? You're just going to have to not make any money,
Well,
basically.
and all of this stuff gets explained in the scene too. Like there's a
Yeah,
Godfather thing here where they want him to get into the drug trade and he doesn't want to get into the drug trade,
yeah.
which is maybe hinted at earlier in the
It's brought
movie,
up
but
one time.
it's
It's like one
explicitly said
line.
in this scene. Oh, you
Yeah,
didn't do this, you did this. Yeah, yeah. Like we didn't see him do much of anything, really.
yeah, yeah.
Masso must have seen part of this movie that got cut out of the movie.
Yeah, he didn't do the drugs, he did the women, the prostitutes or whatever, because it's supposed to be because he has this moral compass. But again, we don't
Right.
see any of this. We don't get a scene where he's like, I'm not doing it. I'm not getting into this. Like, this is what it's going to lead to or whatever. And we actually get a sense of his character, right? We don't get that. So we get this scene and it seems like, okay, then we get the part where it's like, okay, I guess it's going to be okay. Like, he's going to get out of this and then maybe he's going to have some plot. Because I'm like, there's still a good amount of the movie left. Are we going to have some sort of like, he leaves and then like sets up some sort of like operation to get in and kill them or whatever, whatever. And then they
I'll be
review.
honest with you. One last time, let me talk about the
Yeah.
book because it's way, way, way better in the book. It's a whole other thing. So he gets basically all of Joe Coughlin's guys, or the majority of Joe Coughlin's guys, get killed in this scene.
Okay.
And Joe gets the cement shoes treatment. They take him out on a boat. He's betrayed by Albert White, that
Mm.
is who shows up again in this scene.
Yeah.
and they bring him out to the middle of the ocean, and there's this incredible shootout on a boat where like this guy comes by in a plane with a Gatling gun on it and like kills all of Pescator's guys. It's like I was waiting for that scene in this movie. I was like, if they pull that off, because I heard there was a good scene toward the end of this, a shootout sequence, which I guess was this.
Yes. It was this.
So I was expecting that, you know, that
Mm.
ocean-born sort of like
Mhm.
everybody dies, you know, blood everywhere. It's incredibly done in the book, and I was like, if this movie has that, at least it would be something. At least I could walk away from this thinking, all right, they got something right, and they don't even try to go for that. It's
Right.
it kind of all just really ends right here.
Yeah. So the reveal of Albert White is supposed to be the real moment where you realize, oh, okay,
Yeah,
like he's completely fucked, right? It's like that's it. That's it. And Albert's gonna kill him, and he gets him to stop trying to kill him because he shows him the picture of this woman
Emma.
that
Yeah,
everyone
that he was
that they
with
thought was
before, who they
dead.
thought was dead, and they were
Even
both
she
in love
thought,
with
even
her.
he thought
Yeah,
she was dead. It's this random picture that Zoe Saldana's brother took of people in Miami, happened to catch her in a picture. And, you know, Albert's also like, oh, where is she? And he's like, I'm not fucking telling you until, you know, whatever. And then the whole shootout begins. And then we get the thing with the, you know, that kind of thing. So the shootout happens. We talked about that already. Affleck basically could take over this whole family. And he just goes like, you know, I'm not going to kill any of you other guys. If you want to go back to Boston, go ahead. If you want to stay here, you can be part of our crew. But you're going to be working for Chris Messina, basically, right? I'm done. I'm walking away. So he walks away and he goes to see Emma. Is that her name? In a scene that I really don't understand in this movie,
right.
what it has any place in meaning of.
Yeah, I
Because,
agree. It's in the book. It's a little bit different. She's in Cuba in the book. He goes to Cuba for a while, and
right.
it's kind of an interesting thing. It does pay off some stuff from earlier on, but here it's like we don't care about her anymore,
Yeah.
and he doesn't really care about her anymore. So
Yeah. And
what
what
are
is,
we
but the
doing
thing is, like,
here?
I feel like it's supposed to give you like a look how far he's come, look
Right.
how
Well,
much he's
what
grown.
they say in the beginning. They want to be Bonnie and Clyde, right? Like
Yeah.
we're gonna take off, we're gonna steal all this money, and we're gonna go on the lam. And she wants
Yeah.
to be free. And
Yeah.
then he kind of weirdly, even though he becomes a mobster, he
Yeah.
settles down. He's raising a family. I
Yeah.
think he has a son at this point. Yeah.
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure either because
Yeah.
it's not really established very well, but they're thinking of starting a family. You know, again, the Zoe Saldana character, there's so little to her. She's so
Yeah.
much more interesting. She's supposed to be, you know, she's sending money home to Cuba. She's actually married and, you know, like to this guy who's kind of a prick. And then she ends up with Joe. And there's this whole, like, just them being together is kind of a conflict in the book.
Right.
And it's really not addressed here at all. And she's just kind of his conscience or something. I
That
don't
is
know if they're-
exactly what she's meant to be in this movie.
Yeah.
And again, it doesn't work. I know he's like, we set up Zoe Saldana's house for just
For-
destitute women and children or whatever at the end. But you guys have seen, you know, and again, it's just like, okay, like you haven't come anywhere though. Like you're the same person that you were at the beginning of this movie.
Well,
like
but
there's no
he doesn't want to be free anymore, right?
right,
Like
but
he doesn't
but I
doesn't
never
want to
got
be
the sense he
frivolous.
wanted to be free
No,
before.
well, no, because he doesn't sell it. But that's what her
No.
character says in the beginning. He's
Right.
like, yeah, let's run away together, whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
And then this scene, yeah, it's completely pointless.
Yeah.
We know that he's not gonna, you know, like there should be some question, right? If these two
Yeah.
characters are gonna see each other again, well, is he gonna leave his wife for her? Like
Yeah.
she was, because she's so important to that character, the way the
Yeah.
story is supposed to be, that it's like he'd do anything for her. He'd sell out his own mother for her.
Right.
And that never happens at all.
No.
And so there's no question as to what they're going to do. You know, the scene is going to end with him just like turning his back on her and she's going to be fine with it. So why even have it?
Yeah, absolutely. Then we get the Zoe Saldana death scene, which is supposed to be affecting. It's just not at all.
It's not, it's barely articulated, right?
Yeah,
It's
Chris Cooper kills
Chris Cooper
her. Yeah.
shows up outside their house. They have this nice suburban house and he has two guns, which could be a fun looking John Woo moment.
Yeah.
And he's saying repent because that's his thing that the daughter
Yeah.
says he's been saying to himself.
Yeah.
And it's like a 2-second shot. Couple bullet holes go through the window. Ben Affleck goes outside, shoots Chris Cooper like 16 times, goes back
Mhm.
in. His wife is dead. And it's like, all right, roll credits. But
Yeah.
it doesn't. As we
He also, this scene, it's like his wife is dead and he's like crying, he's like holding his son is standing right there.
Someone needs to direct that kid. I know the director is in the scene, so he can't
Yeah.
tell the kid to like do something believable. But
Yeah. Yeah. It just like
Not
also
kid's fault.
Joe, like, I don't know, maybe get your son out of the room where his mother has a bullet hole in her head or whatever. Like so weird.
No, it's this moment's for me. Stay right
exactly.
there.
Yeah,
kid. Yeah.
exactly. And speaking of the Chris Cooper thing coming back, just in that scene with Elle Fanning where she's explaining what her father is doing, right? Just in there saying, repent, repent, repent. If this movie was constructed with tension and with a little bit more going on, that scene would have carried some sort of tension to it or weirdness. That you would have felt like the tension of like what she's saying means something, right?
Yeah.
Other than just what she's saying in the moment, but you don't feel that. It just seems like it's the way Affleck's character reacts is like, oh, that's kind of weird, or like, will he be okay or whatever? And she's like, I
Yeah.
don't know. I'm gonna go make it way better and just slit my throat or whatever in a bed. But so then she dies, and then we have that scene in the movie theater, right, where he's with the kid, and the movie comes up, and you see the name of the brother, and he goes, "That's my brother." Again, something that we bring up 3 times and never gets resolved. I feel like the only reason it remains being brought up is because this is the final scene of the movie. So it always had to be that way. So he has to bring up the brother other times, or it wouldn't make any sense, right? That what this last scene is. Not that it makes a ton of sense anyway.
I don't understand why it's in the movie at all if you're not
Also,
gonna.
thank God we didn't see Scott Eastwood, because Scott Eastwood's never been good in anything he's ever done. And this definitely would have made this movie better.
He's also so much younger than Ben Affleck, and he's supposed to be the older brother.
Yeah,
That doesn't make a lot of sense either.
Ben's got his own little thing going on with that. I feel like the age thing.
Yeah.
Um,
But yeah, this ending makes very little sense. So he kind of leaves the life and he goes and raises his son, and they're fishing together down in Florida. And like, that's nice. That's very sweet. But it's like, what's the point of this story at this
Yeah.
point? Like, you know, Joe is not that great of a guy. And yet
No.
he kind of gets away. And like, we are supposed to feel that like, yes, he's gotten out of the life and he's become a better person, whatever. But the loss of his wife is supposed to be like the most devastating thing in the world.
Right.
And this should be, if she was a more important character in the movie, then her death would be so much more impactful. And he would be this haunted man, right? Like, yes, unlike most movie gangsters, he doesn't die at the end, but it's supposed to be like the Godfather thing, like you sold your soul, you lost the most important thing. You lost your family, you lost your wife, you lost your life, whatever, even if you're still technically alive. But no, they seem to be having some nice father-son moments together, fishing and going to the movies, and then we roll credits. And it's like, what did I just do for the past 2 hours and 8 minutes of my life?
Yeah.
And yeah, I know the exact running time because I felt every second of it.
It's like the end of The Town a little bit, right? Where it's like, you just get to do whatever you want now. Like,
yeah, it is very much so. Yeah. And like, weird Ben Affleck. Like, so when you play the guy, then the guy just gets away with it. Like Casey Affleck, who actually is a good guy in Gone Baby Gone, he's the one who loses everything. And that last scene is devastating.
Yes.
And all these other guys, well, we did some stuff. It wasn't great, but here we are. We came out on the other side of it.
The thing I will say, even though I think Argo is a very good movie, I would say, and this is not a good movie, I think it would be way better off if he just decided to direct these movies now and wasn't the star of them. You can be in it, be a supporting character, that's fine. But in order to do your best, you cannot be the central figure in every scene, because I think this movie would have probably a ton more style, right? If he was, and a ton more interesting framings and shots and performances from the lead actor, if it's not Ben Affleck having to do it, right? And I think you just need to get away from that, But anyway, this movie opened Christmas of 2016, and then wide in January 2017. It made $10 million.
Ninth at the box office. Yeah.
$10 million total in its domestic run, I should say, not on its opening weekend. And it cost $90 million. So that's not good. That's not a good percentage. That's not what you want those numbers to look like. And it's, it's not any wonder why he doesn't make another movie for like 7 years after this movie gets made, right? And it's a small movie that is a streaming movie, basically, that goes to streamer. It's an Apple. I think it's Apple. I think that's what that movie is. Air. That's the thing we were going to talk about. But it's kind of fascinating, right? That, both his directing and his movie career, really, his acting career, don't really blossom after this, at all. We get it again, like Affleck always does. He just the guy who has like these ups and downs, like, right? He just kind of, every time you think, okay, he figured it out, he falls off the precipice again, right? He had that run of like, okay, I'm directing Gone Baby Gone. I'm in the Town. Directing, I'm in Argo. I'm in Gone Girl, right? And then you're like, okay, he figured it out. He's got it back. And then he does this and the Batman movies. Even though I will say this, he's one of the people who comes off the best in those movies. He definitely is bringing something to them and like a reality to a performance in those that I think are lacking in a lot of other places.
I'm
Um,
trying to think if I've seen, I think I've only seen him in one that he like cameoed in. Like,
okay,
I'm
yeah,
not sure. I don't remember which one it was, but I've never seen
um,
Batman v Superman. I've never seen Justice League. I've
yeah.
seen one where he just like appeared in a scene, and I think it might have been Suicide
He's
Squad.
in one scene of Suicide Squad. Yeah,
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 I
yeah,
think
yeah,
that's where
yeah.
I saw him as
Yeah.
Batman, and I was like, all right, that's about all I need to see there.
Yeah. He's those movies. I don't like those movies. I should say I don't like the Snyder
Yeah.
superhero movies very much. But he's at least he's not bad casting for what they were doing, right? And he's decent in them. I won't go first say good because there's only so good you can be in movies that aren't
Yeah, but I
giving you
remember when
much.
they cast him, and
Yeah.
it was like Ben Affleck as Bruce Wayne makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think he's been, I'm not going to say he hasn't been good in movies in between these two dips, but
What's he done acting wise?
let's look up. I mean, the thing I think about the most is he's in a couple James Gray movies, right? He does the way back, which I think is actually a pretty good movie.
I've not seen that, but I've seen the Way Back. That's a really good
The
movie.
way back is a good movie. The way back is, he's I'm pretty sure
What is
it's
that? The basketball movie
yeah, and he's like an
where he plays a reformed alcoholic.
alcoholic. Yeah.
Yeah, which Ben Affleck is.
But this is when he's best, right? Is when he is digging into those parts of his personality.
Yeah, yeah. The sort
Um,
of troubled life of Ben. His father had substance abuse issues, and he's an interesting guy. I mean,
yes.
he's not the tabloid idiot that he was made out to be. And I do think there's like watching this movie and thinking about what he was doing in the DC universe. And, this is not a psychoanalysis show, but I was thinking about it. Like, do you think it sucks to be Ben Affleck? Because I kind of feel like it does.
I think sometimes it does probably suck to be Ben Affleck. Here's the thing, because he's the opposite of a dum dum, and I think we've talked about this before.
Yeah,
But he is obviously an incredibly intelligent person, and I
he
think
is.
he
And
thinks about this stuff a
sensitive
lot.
and interesting and has good
Yes.
taste in movies and
Yes.
wants to make a statement and loves that new Hollywood period of the 70s and stuff. But, it's just like I rarely see like the famous tabloid photo of him where he's just like in sweatpants with a Dunkin' Donuts coffee in
Hmm.
his hand. You've seen that
Of
one, right?
course, where
And
he
like
looks like he's like depressed or
haggard and yeah, he's
yeah,
put on
yeah,
a little bit of weight. And it's like, so every time you go out to get coffee, there's somebody taking pictures of you looking like
yeah,
that. And every quirk in your relationship with this very, very famous person who's also kind of a
yeah.
tabloid
Hmm.
figure, like it doesn't feel like it's very fun to be Ben Affleck. And he's got an Oscar and he's got a great career and he's a
Yeah.
handsome guy and
Yeah.
he's got a lot going for him. But it's like after seeing this movie, it really kind of made me feel a little bad for Ben Affleck.
Yeah. So since Live by Night, obviously there's Justice League, but after that, there's that movie Triple Frontier he did, the J.C. Chandor movie, like the military movie. He's in Silent Bob reboot, obviously. The Way Back, which I think is pretty good. The Last Duel, which rocks.
I would like to see that movie. I forgot he was in that.
Yeah, yeah. He wrote that movie.
Yeah.
Him and Damon wrote that movie together and Ridley Scott directed it. The Tender Bar, which I also think is
Oh, I liked it. Okay, so
pretty good.
it is. It's kind of a nothing movie, but
Yeah.
it's a fun 2 hour hang.
Yeah. And then he's
Forgot
got
about the
like
Tender Bar. That's a good one.
he did that movie Deep Water a couple years ago with Ana de Armas, which was supposed to be like a,
Erotic thriller. That,
Adrian Lyne comeback because it's Adrian Lyne movie and it just didn't hit for anybody. And then he was in Clerks 3, obviously. He's gonna show up in those. He's in Air, which he directed. He plays Phil Knight in Air, and he's a ton of fun in that. And that's really it. I mean, then he's got The Accountant 2 coming up, which the first Accountant is a wildly weird hit. Like it made a lot of money. The Accountant.
that
so
movie any good?
I don't think so. I didn't see it, to be honest
okay.
with you.
I would have felt like that was something that you would have watched on a plane or something.
Believe me, if I took more flights, probably. It seems like a perfect plane movie. I get a little tired of like, there's my like single hitman who's kind of quirky or whatever. Like quotient can be hit pretty fast, I feel like. But again, interesting actor, interesting guy. This movie's
Often
bad.
an interesting director. Like
Yes.
really, he had quite a run there. I really do appreciate those first three movies more than ever before. But yeah, it all kind of hits a brick wall with Live by Night.
We head more into safe territory next time when we're going to talk about Air. I'm very interested to see what you think of it. I enjoyed my time with it when I first saw it, but when I saw it, it was getting a lot of positive,
Good press, yeah.
good press. And so I was like, okay, all right, Affleck's back. And then I was kind of like, okay, like it's good, but it's still a movie about like how cool are we at Nike, you know? So it's like, a little bit like take it, but you got some good performances, right? You got Matt Damon up in there, you got Jason Bateman in there, Viola Davis is in the movie. Ben Affleck playing Phil Knight is a ton of fun.
Viola Davis plays Michael Jordan's mom, right?
Mom, yes.
That's fun. See,
Yeah.
like I remember seeing that movie and be like, oh, that's probably fine. But
Yeah.
I have so little time in my advanced age now. It's like, well, am I going to watch a movie that's fine? Am I going to go into a movie that's like, this will be an okay time, but shouldn't I be watching something better with the very limited time I have to watch movies? So
Chris Tucker is in it.
See how it goes.
I think we got more Affleck. Chris Messina comes back. Matthew Maher comes back.
What does he play? I gotta know.
I don't really remember him in the movie, so I'm not totally sure.
Is he a pervert or a criminal of any kind?
I don't think so. I'm sure he just plays somebody in the office. There's not a lot of other characters than the characters who like work at the office or whatever that they work in.
Well, great, because I kind of felt bad for that guy after seeing this movie.
Yeah.
I would have never worked with Ben Affleck again after those two. He is very good. Gone Baby Gone, though.
Yes, he's great in Gone Baby Gone. So that's Live by Night. Big disappointment. Next week, we're going to talk about Air. If you want to get in touch with us or we're looking at Air stuff, intrepidfilmographers.com. Subscribe on all your podcast platforms of choice and review us as well. Really, really helps. We'll be back next time with Air, and then we'll probably discuss who we're going to do next after Ben Affleck. We got some bonus episodes that we're probably going to do for him, but we'll probably talk about who we're going to do next week. Talk about what we got in the future coming up. But until then, thank you, Nick.
Thank you, Bobby.
And thank you to everybody who's listening. Until next time, be good to one another. Later.